So Steve, strategy, that is a word that is thrown around quite loosely by a lot of investors and buyers agencies. So I'd love for you to actually define what a strategy is, because it looks very different for everyone.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And there are platforms out there, and there's kind of a lot of other sort of vendors who do pretty detailed sort of strategies. But the way I kind of look at it is that sometimes if you get a 50-page document, for example, there's really only 2 pages you're really looking at. And in there, and all of that really boils down to what your end goal is and what you're trying to accomplish. And it's actually a lot more simple than a lot of people think it is. Once you've defined what that strategy is, whether it's passive income, whether it's buying the dream PPOR, either yourself or your partner wanting to go part-time down the track, that then sort of dictates the type of strategy that you need to sort of adopt. And so one thing that I've kind of noticed as myself as an investor, there's a lot of platforms out there where you can potentially put quite a few numbers in and sort of model that out and sort of show, okay, if I get sort of 5-6% growth rate and I sort of buy this particular asset, that I can get to this sort of goal. And what I found is, and feedback working with other clients, is it's not too helpful really, because there's so many sort of just supposed type scenarios that might happen on there, like whether you get the pay rise, whether you change jobs, whatever it might be, another kid or whatever. And so what I found that the most important strategy to do now is seeing how you can best use that borrowing capacity. So if you set your end goal, let's just keep round numbers, 100,000 passive income, what that likely looks at. So if we work backwards from that, we know that we need to construct a $2 million property portfolio. And so from there, rather than putting that in a spreadsheet or in a platform, which is really pie in the sky, you work with a broker. And we don't take any kickbacks or referral fees, as you know, but we want the best professional out there who's going to be able to model that out and show you, okay, well, these are the 4 type of properties that you can buy at the moment with the types of lenders that you can get. So that's something tangible that you can actually use right now. And I think strategy, from my mind, is much better getting that bit nutted out. And then from ourselves at Property Strats, we can buy those right assets that's going to construct that goal at the start of the cycle, so you can actually wait a property cycle and then you can actually sort of reap the dividends of that, and that's all aligned to your end goal. So that's kind of, I know it's talked about a lot, and I think a lot of people overcomplicate it, but I think the most powerful strategy is working out what you're trying to achieve now and then finding the right professional who can actually maximize that borrowing power now so you can get to where you need to get to.
And I think that's really important as well, because there's, like, what I'm hearing from people that are coming onto the calls with me is that they're saying that a lot of the time the strategy is only looked at from like this next asset that they're looking to buy rather than the longer term. And I think it's really important, as you mentioned, to like look at the longer term goal to make sure that you don't get yourself stuck in a portfolio.
No, absolutely. Because if you go, let's just say you're working with a broker, they say you've got 1 million borrowing capacity, yeah. So you go and buy $1 million house. But when you look at that house, you know, it could be in a market that's already risen 100%. It might have a 3% yield. And what that's going to do is it's going to kill your borrowing power or your serviceability to be able to get another property. So you're going to then hope that that property is going to be a really decent capital growth type property, so you can potentially extract equity out of it and go again. Or you have to wait for that rent to rise, or you need to go start earning more money. So it's really out of your control if you buy that type of asset. Whereas if you kind of chop that up and really look at it, you might already have something that's negative, you know, say 20,000 a year. What's that next asset that you're going to buy so you can actually get into IP number 3 that's aligned to your end goal?
So Steve, like you mentioned that if you do have 1 million borrowing capacity and like you need to be splitting it up in the right assets to know that you can actually get towards your longer term goal. Like how are you actually doing that, and how do you even start really?
Oh yeah, and this is where I think quite a few people go wrong. Like, just because you've got the borrowing power there, or let's just say someone has modeled it out where you can maybe do, you know, 4 or 5 purchases. So what should you go and do? And so really kind of what we're looking at here is what's really portfolio construction and getting the right mix for your portfolio. So there needs to be a good analogy of this is a fruitcake. And I heard this one, I'm kind of stealing, but anyway, it's a good one. So think of your portfolio like a fruitcake. So with a fruitcake, you've got a couple of ingredients, and you need, you know, the right amount of milk, you need the right amount of sugar, the right amount of butter, whatever it might be, to get the right mix. And so with a portfolio, really there's 2 ingredients to get the right mix. You've got capital growth, and then you've got cash flow. So capital growth is there to sort of say you do equity extraction, so you can rip out equity to buy another property, and then cash flows there for the serviceability component, so you can keep buying those sort of property. Now, you used to be able to get both of those. In fact, you still can with certain assets now. Do a bit of capital growth, cash flow, that's obviously nirvana. But to get really supersized sort of capital growth, you need to be in a market where the yields aren't so good. So it's all about trying to have the right ingredients in mix to get the best, outcome for the fruitcake. Same thing as a portfolio. And so from Property Strat's point of view, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at, okay, if you've gone too heavy on the sugar, for example, here, you need to sort of balance that out with a few other things. If you've gone too heavy on the capital growth component here, we're looking at assets that are going to sort of bring you back into that sort of regard so you can get to that end goal. So that's a good way, I think, of kind of like explaining that portfolio mix concept.
For sure. I think that's a great analogy there.